Hey, and welcome to the deep dive. You know how sometimes you get those weird little health things?
Yeah, like a rash or maybe a headache.
Exactly, after certain foods sometimes, or just feeling a bit off, and you can't quite figure out why.
Uh-huh. Happens all the time.
Well, today we're diving deep into something that might be behind it for, well, loads of people. Allergies and something called histamine intolerance.
Right. Things many of us deal with or know someone who does.
And this deep dive is really for you to help kind of unravel what might be going on.
We've looked at some really interesting stuff that breaks down the causes and, importantly, how to address them.
So our mission today is basically to unpack histamine, what it does,
Yeah, and tell the difference between an actual allergy and this intolerance thing,
spot potential triggers.
and explore ways you can actually manage your histamine levels
Right.
to feel better, essentially.
Okay, let's get into it then. Allergies. I mean, almost everyone experiences them at some point, right?
Absolutely. From, like, seasonal sniffles to much bigger reactions.
And it feels like they're everywhere.
Yeah. And while, genetics play a part, a lot of it is triggered by our environment.
And how much histamine our body produces in response.
Exactly. The more histamine that gets released, the stronger those allergy symptoms usually are.
Okay, so histamine. That's the key player today. But what is it actually doing? It sounds like more than just itchy eyes.
Oh, definitely. It's a real multitasker.
Yeah.
So yes, allergies, it helps call in certain immune cells, eosinophils.
Yeah.
It's also involved in making stomach acid, digestion.
Right.
But here's the really interesting part. It's also a neurotransmitter in your brain.
A neurotransmitter, like the brain's messengers.
Precisely. Which means if your histamine levels are kind of wonky,
Hmm.
it can show up in really unexpected ways.
Like what?
Well, headaches, definitely. Trouble sleeping. Even things like anxiety or mood changes.
Wow. Okay, so that explains why sometimes you feel generally unwell during allergy season, not just sneezy.
Exactly. It connects a lot of dots.
So if histamine's doing all this, how do levels get too high? Where does it come from?
Good question. There are basically two main routes.
Okay.
First, like we said, during an allergic reaction, your immune system releases it.
Yeah.
And second, simply from the histamine that's already in the food you eat.
Ah, okay, let's zoom in on that.
Mhm.
Histamine in food. I don't think many people realize that. How does it get there?
So this is pretty cool, actually. It's mostly made by bacteria.
Bacteria in the food.
Yeah. They have these enzymes that take an amino acid, histidine, which is naturally in lots of foods, and they convert it into histamine.
Okay.
And this whole process speeds up when food isn't super fresh or when it's fermented.
Mm-hmm.
Because, bacteria love those conditions.
Right, so that leftover chili, maybe not the best idea if you're sensitive.
Could be contributing, yeah.
Yeah.
It really highlights the importance of freshness.
And you mentioned fermentation. What about things like sauerkraut or kimchi? They're meant to be good for your gut, right?
Well, yes, for many people they are. Great for the microbiome. But, and this is a big but for some,
Uh-oh.
they could be packed with histamine because of that fermentation process.
Ah, I see.
So for someone with histamine intolerance or maybe underlying gut stuff like SIBO,
SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
yeah, for them, those healthy fermented foods could actually make things worse.
Wow. That really shows how personalized diet needs to be. No one-size-fits-all healthy.
Absolutely not.
So how would someone even start to think, maybe this is histamine intolerance? What are the signs?
The symptoms can be, well, pretty diverse, and they tend to pop up relatively soon after eating high histamine foods.
Okay, like what sort of things?
You might get recurring headaches or migraines, chronic stuffy nose or sinus issues, digestive problems, often diarrhea, maybe asthma-like symptoms, wheezing,
Right.
even heart stuff like palpitations, feeling dizzy, maybe low blood pressure sometimes, and skin reactions are common, redness, itching, hives.
That's quite a list. So if you notice a pattern of those things after eating certain foods...
Then histamine intolerance is definitely something worth considering, yeah.
Okay, so if you suspect it, what foods are the usual suspects, the high histamine ones to maybe watch out for?
Generally, the list often includes things like alcohol, especially red wine,
Okay.
preserved or smoked meats like bacon or sausages, cured meat, salami, pepperoni,
Gotcha.
aged cheeses, big one,
Jeez.
canned foods sometimes, avocado, chocolate, eggs, especially if they're not super fresh, soy products, nuts,
Wow.
strawberries, spinach, mustard. And like we talked about, fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, natto.
Gosh, looking at that list, so many of those are things people think of as healthy. Avocados, spinach, nuts, fermented stuff.
Exactly. It really drives home that avoiding them isn't about them being bad foods overall. It's purely about individual tolerance to histamine.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Which leads us to a really important distinction. What is the difference between a proper food allergy and this histamine intolerance? Because they can sound similar symptom-wise.
That's a crucial point. They're
Mm.
fundamentally different processes.
How so?
An allergy is an immune system reaction. Your body mistakenly flags a harmless food protein, say peanuts, as dangerous.
Okay.
It creates specific antibodies called IgE antibodies against it. The next time you eat peanuts, those IgE antibodies trigger immune cells to release histamine and a bunch of other chemicals very quickly.
Right, the classic allergic reaction.
Exactly. Histamine intolerance, though, is usually a digestive issue.
Mm.
It's typically because you don't have enough of a specific enzyme called diamine oxidase, DAO,
DA.
diamine oxidase. Think of it as the histamine cleanup crew in your gut.
Ah, okay.
Its job is to break down histamine from your food before it gets absorbed in your bloodstream and causes problems elsewhere.
So if you don't have enough DAO.
The histamine from your food builds up, gets absorbed, and you get symptoms.
So allergy is immune system overreacting. Intolerance is often not enough of the cleanup enzyme.
That's a great summary. Different root causes, even if some symptoms overlap because histamine is involved in both.
Okay, that clears things up. So if someone suspects intolerance, not allergy, how do they figure it out? Are there tests?
Well, the gold standard for figuring out food triggers is often an elimination diet.
Right, cutting things out and reintroducing them.
Exactly. Systematically remove high histamine foods for a bit, see if things improve, then add them back one by one to see what triggers symptoms.
Sounds logical, if a bit tedious.
It can be, but it's often very revealing. There are also commercial food intolerance tests out there. Blood tests, looking at antibodies, things like that.
Reliable?
That's debated. The science behind some of them isn't super solid yet, and they can sometimes give false positives.
Meaning you cut out foods you don't actually need to?
Potentially, yeah. So they need to be interpreted carefully, usually with a healthcare professional, but honestly, even without a definitive test, if you have the symptoms, trying strategies to lower your overall histamine load can often bring relief anyway.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's talk strategies. Our bodies must have ways to fight back against histamine, right? We're not totally defenseless.
Absolutely. Your body produces its own natural antihistamines, essentially. Hormones like adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol.
Ah, the stress hormones.
Yeah, but they also have anti-inflammatory and antihistamine effects. And interestingly, some practices can temporarily boost these.
Like what?
Well, things that activate your sympathetic nervous system, your fight-or-flight response in a controlled way.
You mentioned the Wim Hof method earlier, like breathing and cold exposure. How does that help with histamine?
The idea is that the specific breathing techniques and the shock of the cold water immersion trigger a release of adrenaline and cortisol.
Okay.
This temporary surge can help dampen inflammation and reduce vasodilation, the widening of blood vessels, which are key parts of the histamine reaction.
So a cold shower could potentially calm down an allergic reaction.
Potentially, yes. It's a way to tap into your body's own mechanisms, possibly without the side effects you might get from medication. Pretty neat.
That is neat. Okay, what about things we can eat? Any foods that help counteract histamine?
Definitely. A big focus here is on flavonoids, particularly one called quercetin.
Quercetin. Okay, what's special about that?
It's a really powerful antioxidant, first off. Fights free radicals, good for overall health, even linked to healthy aging. It acts as a senolytic, helping clear out old cells.
Wow.
It's also strongly anti-inflammatory. But crucially for us today, it's a potent natural antihistamine.
How does it work as an antihistamine?
It seems to stabilize mast cells. Those are the immune cells that actually release histamine during an allergic reaction. So quercetin can kind of keep the lid on the histamine release.
So it stops the problem before it starts, in a way.
That's the idea, yeah. It helps prevent that initial surge.
Cool. So how do we get more quercetin?
Lots of plant foods contain it. Some of the best sources are capers, red onions, especially the outer layers, asparagus, kale, fennel, cilantro.
Okay, good stuff.
You can also get quercetin supplements, which can be useful for a more concentrated dose, maybe during allergy season or if you know you've eaten high histamine foods.
Any other benefits to quercetin?
Some research suggests it might help with blood sugar regulation and maybe even give a slight edge in athletic performance. Minor stuff, but interesting.
And does how food is grown matter?
It can, yeah. There was one study, for instance, showing organically grown tomatoes had significantly more quercetin than conventional ones. So quality can play a role.
Good to know. So load up on capers and red onions. But you said earlier that just lowering histamine intake isn't the full picture long term. What about that DAO enzyme, the cleanup crew?
Exactly. Managing intake helps symptoms, but supporting your body's ability to break down histamine is key for better tolerance over time. That brings us back to DAO.
Right, the enzyme that breaks down dietary histamine in the gut. How can we boost that?
Well, one direct way, though maybe not for everyone, is eating foods rich in DAO. Kidney is one of the main ones.
Ah, okay, maybe not top of everyone's shopping list.
Probably not. A more practical approach for many is taking DAO supplements.
Okay.
You usually take them right before you eat a meal containing histamine. They provide the enzyme right there in your gut to help break it down.
So it acts locally in the gut.
Exactly. But for a more fundamental improvement, you really want to focus on your overall gut health.
Why is that?
Because your intestinal lining, your gut mucosa, is where a lot of your body's own DAO is produced. If your gut lining isn't healthy,
You'll make enough DAO.
precisely. So things that support gut health are crucial, like maybe intermittent fasting, giving your gut a rest, and definitely improving your gut microbiome balance. We cover gut health in more detail elsewhere, but it's fundamental here.
It always comes back to the gut, doesn't it?
So often, yes.
So it really sounds like managing histamine is very individual. It's about figuring out your triggers, your tolerance, what strategies work for you.
Absolutely. And getting a handle on it isn't just about feeling better day to day, although that's huge. It can potentially help prevent bigger digestive issues down the road, too.
Right.
It really underscores that the best diet or lifestyle isn't generic. It has to consider you where you live, your age, activity level, any gut issues you already have. It's all connected.
Okay, so let's try and bring it all together. We've seen histamine is, well, way more than just allergies. It's involved in digestion, brain function.
Yep, a key player.
And knowing the difference between a true immune-driven allergy and an intolerance, often linked to that DAO enzyme, is vital.
Crucial for finding the right approach.
And we've got tools, right? Watching high histamine foods, boosting intake of things like quercetin.
And manage symptoms, definitely.
But for longer-term improvement, supporting that DAO enzyme, maybe through supplements, but especially through great gut health, seems key.
That's the foundation, really. A healthy gut supports healthy histamine breakdown.
Fantastic summary. Which I guess leads us to a final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah, maybe think about this. How does your specific environment, the air quality where you live, your stress levels, and your lifestyle, what you eat, how you sleep interact?
How might those unique factors be influencing your personal histamine picture, your reactions?
Exactly. What small personalized experiments could you try? Maybe it's adding more quercetin foods. Maybe it's trying a cold shower. Maybe it's focusing on gut health.
What little tweak might make a difference for you? It encourages looking beyond just general advice.
Totally. Tune into your own body. That's where the real answers often lie.